Namaste. You had another question?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Buddhists doesn't believe in a God, but since we don't believe in a God, how do we know what's right and what's wrong? Because sometimes I come with decisions where I have to decide for myself if this is right and this is wrong. I don't know if there is a standard or a teaching that kind of helps you with your morality and stuff like that.
Yes, the Buddha spent a lot of time talking about ethics and morality. If you just look at the Eightfold Path, it begins with right view and right thought, but then there's right speech, avoiding lying, harsh speech, gossip, and so on. So right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, which is really a kind of right action, but because we spend so much time with our work, it's separated out. Right effort, which is really about putting our effort into the Dharma. But particularly right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Right there, in the part of the Buddha's very first teaching, he's talking about ethics. And it's important to understand what a Buddha is. A Buddha is a being who sees perfectly clearly the truth. And so a Buddha can see exactly what will lead to suffering and what will lead away from suffering. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about ethics or morality in Buddhism. It's understanding what leads to suffering and what leads away from suffering. So the way to understand which direction to go is to study the Buddha's teaching. But inevitably we'll come to some weird situation where it's not clear. Should I go left or should I go right? And sometimes it's well, there'll be suffering if I go this way, and there'll be suffering if I go this way. So what's the best thing to do? Then we fall back on compassion. Right? What will cause, maybe the question is, what will cause the least suffering? And we just make the best decision that we can. But as ignorant, unenlightened beings, at some point we're going to make a mistake. We're not going to see all the implications of this decision we're making. So we make the decision and, oh no, it was the bad decision. It was the worst decision. If our motivation was compassion, if our motivation was to be selfless and try to avoid causing suffering, even if we make a mistake, we've done good. And then we can use that situation to learn more wisdom for the next time. Yes. Thank you.
Basically, what I'm trying to ask is, if there's no faith, won't the Buddhist won't he like when he saw the guy with the guitar and with the string that and two guys? Oh, I think it's okay. Oh, yeah, I'm not good. Yes, in Vietnamese.
You're talking about the before Buddha got enlightened, one of the on the heaven they have the guitar and two strings, one and two to tighten rope. The other one is to loose that makes it sound. The one in the middle makes it sound. So that's why the Buddha followed that direction. He got the proof from the Sudama and yeah. So his question is that a faith? Is that faith? Why Buddha taught that guy with that speech?
I really wish I could speak Vietnamese because I know that these other monks, they have years and years more experience and education than me. And I would really love to learn from them, but unfortunately I don't. So I can't really say for sure what this other venerable who was speaking was talking about in terms of faith. If he said that there was no faith, I'm thinking my impression is that he was saying that there is no blind faith. Because it isn't through simply believing that we come to enlightenment. It's through studying and practicing the Dharma that we come to enlightenment. But faith does play a role because, for example, I cannot scientifically prove to you, there's no experiment with computers and machines and chemicals that we can do to prove that the Buddha is a Buddha, that enlightenment is possible. At some point, we just have to say, well, this makes sense based on what I've learned of the Buddha's teachings. This makes sense, so I'm gonna follow that. That takes a certain kind of faith. You have to be willing to make that leap, even without absolute proof. So I would say that there is a role for faith in practicing Buddhism. Yeah, so we just have to, we see a little bit of the Dharma, we study a little of the Dharma, we say, this makes sense, okay, I'm going to go this direction. And then we see a little more and we say, okay, this still makes sense, so I'm going to keep going in this direction. But until we've achieved enlightenment or something very close to it, we're trusting that it's possible. So that's also a good question.
I don't know if I dare to clarify his question, because I thought that at that time when the Prince Siddhartha made that observation, I think it's one observation rather than faith, when he listened to the string of the musical instrument, and that he was just finishing doing what asceticism for so many years, and he thinks that is too strict, and that doesn't help your body at all. But if you are too loose, meaning that you are enjoying life too much, then it doesn't get you anywhere. So you have to choose the middle path. So I think it's one observation that Gautama, how you say, he is not a prince anymore, but he's not Buddha either. So he has decided, no, he has to choose the middle path. That means you just eat enough to keep your body healthy so your mind can work. You cannot make your body too tired and your mind can work. That's what I think that observation he made at that time. So I just don't know if it helped to clarify.
Now I know what you're talking about, yeah. So in this case, it was, yes, the Buddha was making an observation based in his experience. Right. So yeah, that's not really associated with faith.
I know that greed, desire, and want is a bad thing. But like if we stop wanting altogether, wouldn't we stop achieving things? Let's say.
I get this question a lot. Buddhists say desire is bad, but if we don't have desire, we can't accomplish anything. Well, there's a distinction between ignorant, selfish desire and then desire related to the Dharma, desire to benefit other beings, even if you're not a Buddhist, right? The desire to be of benefit to others, to serve others, to help others, that's good desire. So desire that leads us away from suffering should be pursued. Desire that leads us towards suffering should be abandoned. So we have to make this distinction between different kinds of desire.
I think we answered. Oh, we have another question.
Yeah, I think you can do last
question.
I have one question that, so according to the cause and effect law, that what I understand is that as a human being, we are born in this world based on the cause that we have done in the past. And some people are born or were born in generation of Buddhism or Buddhist family. But why
what I see just most in Asia, that most people have the Buddhist religion. But the majority of the population in the West, that they are born as human beings as well, but they are not Buddhist. But one generation after, they are follow different religions. Thank you.
So you're wondering why this change is taking place. Well, it depends on the karma of those individual beings. So now there are some Buddhists in Asia, or people whose families have traditionally been Buddhists, who have converted to Christianity or some other religion. Or they're kind of Buddhist, but they kind of practice Taoism and Confucianism too, like folk religion things as well. They kind of got it all mixed together. It depends upon the karma of those individuals. I was born into a Christian family, but my parents didn't have my sisters or I baptized because they wanted us to choose for ourselves. I was just talking with someone about this earlier today. So when I was 12 years old, I found an old world religions textbook on my father's bookshelf. And of course, I was 12 years old, and this was a graduate student level book, so there was a lot that I didn't understand. But I pulled it off the shelf, and for some reason, I immediately read the section on Buddhism. That's all I wanted to read about. I don't know why. I read the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, and my eyes got this big. And I said, that's what I want to know. There was this like buzzing in my brain, almost a physical response. I'm just sitting there reading a book and I went, that's what I want to know. So I would say clearly I had some connection with the Dharma somehow in a previous life. So it may be, part of it may be that there are people being born in America who are not traditionally Buddhist, but who were Buddhist in some other Buddhist culture in a past life. That may be what's happening now. And then there are other people, I've met people, even in modern America, who have never even heard of the Buddha. Surprisingly, I mean, this is surprising for me, because there are Buddha images and people, mention the Buddha. We've got, Zen soda and all sorts of weird things now. So it surprises me that there are still adults in America who have never even heard of the Buddha. So they look at me in my funny clothes and they say, well, what's this all about? I say, I'm a Buddhist monk. And they're like, what's that? And I say, well, have you heard of the Buddha? And they say, no. And so I tell them a little bit about the Buddha, and that may be the very first time in any lifetime that they've had any connection with the Buddha and his teaching. That maybe that's all they have the karma for, that little tiny exposure, but that plants a seed, so that maybe in their next life, they'll hear about the Buddha again, and then they'll hear about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, and maybe that's it. Then in the next life, they hear a little bit more. So there are also people being born in the world now who are just getting to that point where their minds are ready, or where they have the karma to start hearing about the Buddha's teaching. There are other people I've met who they say, oh, what's with the funny clothing? And I say, I'm a Buddhist monk. And they say, what's that? And I tell them a little bit about Buddhism, and they get angry. They start cursing at me. I'm not kidding. They start cursing at me, telling me to go to hell. Get out of here. This is America. America is not a Buddhist country. That's a foreign religion, blah, blah, blah. I've actually run into people like that, too. So they had the karma to hear something about the Buddha, but the quality of their mind was so negative that they forcefully rejected. And so maybe they won't meet the Buddha Dharma again for many lifetimes, unfortunately. So it just depends. It depends on the karma of those individuals. I'm sorry, that was a long answer.